You're listening to GWP Live. I'm your host, Isaac Hedges. We are just a few moments ago, as many of the folks at home may have likely heard. Shots were fired at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. Again, what would appear to be another assassination attempt for President Trump. So, again, just happening very recently. The investigation still is very much ongoing. In a few moments, we will be joined by co host Jacob Fulmer for more on this. But again, President Trump just got through speaking to the nation after the event. Of course, initially he was scheduled to speak at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner tonight. That did not go as planned after shots were fired. The premises was evacuated. The dinner was called off. They determined at that point that it was very unlikely that they would be able to get the threat out of there for things to be safe for the remainder of the night. So again, it was called off. Again, everyone was evacuated safely. Thankfully, again, President Trump back at the White House recently, again, just moments ago, got through giving an address on that, of course, addressing the threat. Of course, this isn't anything new. We've seen this before, assassination attempts on our president, and now we have another one, sadly, to add to the list, a serious security threat on that front. Now, he did mention at the time he would still like to do the White House Correspondents Press Dinner, so it appears that there are efforts to reschedule it. At least that's what he wants to be done about it. He asked that in the next 30 days, the next month or so, that the White House Correspondents' Dinner be rescheduled and speak. So, again, certainly it was a major event, again, was scheduled. A major event. This happens annually for, again, White House correspondents from a number of different news outlets to address the president, again, with some of their questions on the state of the nation and everything else. And again, so a major event certainly did not go as planned, to say the least. Now, for the folks who are perhaps just tuning in, moments ago, we had shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Press Dinner. It was scheduled for tonight. Again, a major national event for White House correspondents for all sorts of news outlets. But again, things didn't go quite as planned when shots were fired. Thankfully, the premises was evacuated safely. Again, security, Secret Service determined that it was unlikely that they would be able to, again, isolate the threat, determine what it was, again, ensure that the premises was safe for the event to continue within the night. So because of that, the event was called off. And again, it would now appear that it's postponed. President Trump, even at the time, suggested that it be postponed. He said, I still want to do this dinner. And so now, chances are in the next 30 days or so, at least that's what's been asked, that's when the White House Correspondents' Press Dinner will be rescheduled for. And in a few moments, we will be joined by co host Jacob Fulmer for more on this event. So, not abundantly clear the culprit in this. Again, if there were a single shooter, again, if there were multiple people involved, some sort of conspiracy, not abundantly clear at this point. Information is still coming in. Again, any of the folks at home who would like to call in with any of those burning questions are welcome to do that at 417 448 0819. Again, that number is 417 448 0819 for all of those burning questions. You'll have to stay tuned for the latest developments on that here on GWP Live. Just checking on that as more information comes in again here over the next few moments. We thank you all for tuning in the event of, again, events such as these, breaking news events, severe weather coverage, much of which we've done recently, again, tornadoes, anything like that. We do severe weather coverage in those events. We also, of course, do this breaking news coverage. So a number of different things. And the number one way to stay informed on that, on when exactly these things are going to happen, is to be subscribed to the YouTube channel, Great World Productions, and to receive a notification every time we put out something new, anytime we go live with breaking news, with severe weather in the area, anything like that. The best way to catch all of that, again, when you subscribe, is to hit that bell on YouTube to be notified for all future events. Again, a number of different platforms, a number of different places where you can find us. But again, probably the top one right there. You want to stay tuned for that for future events. Again, details still coming in on the recent event. Shots fired, of course, at what was intended to be the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. Did not quite go as planned when shots were fired. Again, thankfully, the premises was evacuated. Again, the threat was determined, was handled by secret security, so certainly could have been much worse. And again, to many, this might not seem terribly shocking because, well, we've already seen a couple of attempts on the president's life. Again, these assassination attempts, and what would appear to be another one just moments ago tonight. So thankfully, again, the premises was evacuated. The president was able to get back to the White House, but again, not abundantly clear the culprit in that shooting, if there were one, if there were multiple. Again, acting together, still not abundantly clear at this point. Again, we will continue to follow this. Again, as many of the details as we can get to come in tonight. We will hear more from Jacob Vollmer, my co-host, in a few moments when he joins us on air. Again, I'll be calling in a few moments. But again, for anything that we don't get to tonight, as far as the latest details on that, we of course have our routine news coverage at the top of every week. We have GWP News Weekly, again, cover major national, international, local news, and all the rest with the weather and sports coverage. We have a condensed version of that at the end of the week as well. We call GWP News Weekly. So again, for more on that throughout the weeks to come, you will have to stay tuned for that. Again, coming up most immediately beyond tonight is GWP News Weekly. That'll come out on Monday night, comes out every Monday night on Great World Productions, so you will have to stay tuned for that. Now, for the folks who are just tuning in again, moments ago, many have likely heard the White House Correspondents Press Dinner did not go quite as planned. Shots were fired. The premises had to be evacuated. They determined that the threat could not be determined, could not be isolated, again, in a reasonable amount of time where the dinner could be continued with. Again, it was just determined unsafe at that point, was called off for the night. Thankfully, the president was evacuated safely. Again, all the others there, so again, not abundantly clear a lot of the fallout effects of that yet because it did just happen moments ago. It is still very much ongoing. We're continuing to cover it here on GWP Live. But of course, after that happened, again, everyone that we know of was gotten there safely. Again, certainly the president, again, with a track record here. Again, likely another assassination attempt here. We've already seen a couple. So again, just a serious security threat there that happened just moments ago. He wasn't able to speak like he had planned to for some time now at the White House Correspondents Dinner. Of course, a major annual event where the president speaks to some of the White House press correspondents from a number of different media outlets. So again, certainly things didn't go as planned. That was naturally a fair bit later than what his speech initially would have been at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. Now, this breaking news, again, which followed below. Now, President Trump was uninjured. Again, as we mentioned, we now have confirmation of that. Again, we knew this pretty well, again, from the top. Again, certainly had security in place. We've known this to be a threat in the past, but again, we now know that he was safe. Of course, has been confirmed totally uninjured, returned back to the White House with other top leaders of the United States, again, who were at that White House Correspondents' Press Dinner just moments ago. Fortunately, were evacuated Saturday night after the shooting incident outside the ballroom. So, again, that happened just moments ago. Now, one law enforcement official on the site said a gunman had opened fire. A law enforcement officer was shot in the bullet resistant vest, but is expected to be okay. One officer told the Associated Press. That was just moments ago tonight at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. So we know that one of the law enforcement officials there, again, one tasked with, again, the difficult task of defending the president, again, was shot by the gunman just moments ago tonight. But again, fortunately, we know that he was wearing a bulletproof vest and, again, was able to get out of this unharmed, very fortunately. So the FBI also said just moments ago a suspect was in custody, but they had no details. So they have taken a person into custody, again, a potential culprit for the shooting, but no details on it yet. It, of course, happened just moments ago. So again, we'll see how quickly details about this come out for all of that. Again, in the weeks to come, you will have to stay tuned for that on GWP News Weekly, GWP Weekly Recap, covering both ends of the week. You will not want to miss that. Some major information impacting the nation here. Now, the Secret Service and other authorities swarmed the banquet hall at Washington Hilton, again, as guests ducked under tables by the hundreds. Again, many of the folks, of course, naturally weren't able to see exactly what was going on, understandably, but they had heard the shots fired. Again, they knew there was some sort of threat there. So, again, sort of just running out into the hole there, again, ducking for cover under some of the tables. Again, fortunately, we don't know of any major injuries or deaths at this point. But, again, just a real scare moments ago in Washington. So, again, at this time, we know you could hear audibly for those who were there. Again, accounts say gasps echoed through the ballroom as the guests realized that something was happening. Again, must have been just a real spook for anyone who might have been there at the time. Now, hundreds of journalists, they say, got on phones to call in information. Of course, this being a major event each year, specifically for the press, specifically for White House correspondents, for these different media companies. So, again, naturally, you can imagine they're quite shaken up about what just happened moments ago. Again, they were there when this shooting happened. But again, they were able to call in, many of them, to their outlets, again, providing coverage on that, again, albeit in potentially quite dangerous conditions. So, again, certainly something that one does not ordinarily consider, again, in terms of these things. Again, some of the perhaps more extraordinary events that the media is responsible for covering are some of these dangerous ones, again, where quite seriously, many of them, their lives could be on the line. Now, again, at this time, again, we heard some things around this time when the shooting was going on at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. Again, heard audibly, again, someone saying, "Out of the way, sir." Someone yelled. Others yelled to duck. From one corner, "God Bless America" chant began as the president was escorted off stage. So, again, would appear we know now that President Trump was safely escorted from the stage moments ago at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner, where a shooting took place. Again, presumably a serious threat to the president's life, and not the first one, certainly, at that. We've already seen a couple of assassination attempts on President Trump, and again, this would appear, sadly, to be another one. So the investigation still very much ongoing. One suspect related to it has been taken into custody. No details on that yet, but you will have to stay tuned as those details start flowing in. And in a few moments, we've yet to hear from him yet, but in a few moments, we will be joined by co-host Jacob Fulmer for more on this. But this, of course, just happened tonight for the folks who are just tuning in. This, of course, is GWP Live. Of course, oftentimes for these live breaking news events, we will cover them also in the event of severe weather coverage. We've done a lot more of that in recent times. Again, some area severe weather coverage. So, again, all that and more. If you want to be notified whenever these things happen, the best way to do that is to subscribe to Great World Productions on YouTube and hit that bell to receive notifications. Again, some different preferences on there for the notifications, but you don't want to miss out anytime this new information comes out. Again, as we mentioned throughout the night as well. Again, fairly limited details as to what's available at this point, though certainly in the next few days, one would imagine that more details would kind of begin to flow in on what exactly happened, on the investigation, on who was responsible for this threat. So, again, for more on that, you will have to stay tuned. Great World Productions. Again, most immediately coming up beyond tonight, we have coming up on Monday night, as we do most every Monday night, GWP News Weekly. You will have to stay tuned for that. And at the other end of the week, we have sort of a condensed version of those newscasts, a GWP Weekly Recap. You will have to stay tuned for all of that for the latest details. All that and more from Great World Productions. So, unfortunately, after this happened, Secret Service was able to escort the president from the premises, get him safely back to the White House. Again, in time, just moments ago, he gave an address. This was in place of his speech that was scheduled tonight for the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. As we now know, it did not shake out as planned after those shots were fired, but fortunately, he was safely escorted. He was gotten safely back to the White House in time to deliver an address from the White House, an address to the nation, where, again, as was expected, he addressed the threats. Again, addressed the serious thing. Again, in his remarks, in his speech just moments ago, mentioned much of this. Again, many of the threats that he's faced during his time as president, even running for president. Again, a couple of assassination attempts already, and it would appear another one. Again, sadly, what things have come to on that front. So fortunately, we know he was helped up by Secret Service agents outside the hotel. Members of the National Guard and other authorities flooded the area as helicopters circled overhead. So it truly was all hands on deck at this point. Again, fortunately, law enforcement was able to act swiftly and respond to the emergency on that front. So, again, not a great deal of detail on that as to, again, possible injuries in terms of this. We do know that one of the officers there, again, one of the agents there tasked with protecting the president himself, was hit by the gunman, again, was shot, but fortunately he was wearing a bulletproof vest and was able to get out of the situation uninjured. So, very fortunate. Thank goodness he was wearing that vest. Now, authorities have said that the incident occurred outside the subterranean ballroom where Trump and other guests were seated. After an initial attempt to resume, the event was scrapped for the night and rescheduled. As we mentioned, of course, after the shooting happened, they determined it was unlikely that they would be able to clear the premises, determine that things were safe, somehow be able to resume with the dinner within the night. Again, just such a serious threat, and certainly not the first offense on that front. So because of all that, again, they determined just to call off the dinner, and that is why moments ago, in place of his planned speech at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner, as we know, President Trump instead gave his address, again, televised address right from the White House to the nation. And again, one thing notably, again, probably quite different from the address that he had initially planned for the White House Correspondents' Press Dinner, because, of course, a major topic in his address moments ago from the White House was the threat and the series of threats at this point that he has faced during his time as president, even when running as president. So sort of just difficult to imagine, again, with these assassination attempts, again, even assassination of political figures in recent times. Again, sort of the notion that these things just happen, again, much more common, perhaps, again, more concern of it than what there may have been in years past. Again, somewhat mind boggling to many. Again, believe in all of these things happening so suddenly. Again, and if things had happened again on any of a number of recent scenarios, again, it could have been a quite different outcome. So again, fortunately though, things could have gone much worse on that front. Now, again, as we know, authorities, of course, said the incident occurred outside the subterranean ballroom we mentioned just moments ago, sort of the place where it took place. Now, at the event, of course, after they had to call it off, again, was announced there. Of course, they said, we will do this again. This was from Weijia Zhang, president of the White House Correspondents Association. This was shortly afterward that staff began breaking down table settings and the presidential lectern. So, again, things clearly called off for tonight. Again, the premises, for the most part, evacuated where they were having the White House Correspondents Press Dinner, where they intended to. Certainly, things not going as planned for tonight. Now, of course, after this, we know all officials protected by the Secret Service were evacuated. Those in attendance included, of course, President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, in addition to many other leaders in the Trump administration. Again, fortunately, Secret Service was there, was able to act swiftly to get them out, get them escorted from there safely. We do know that one of the officers, one of the agents there, again, tasked with protecting the president, unfortunately was hit, though it could have been much worse. Again, luckily he was wearing a bulletproof vest, and to the best of our knowledge, at this point, was able to get out of there uninjured. So, certainly very fortunate on that front. After the fact, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson said that he and his wife Kelly, who both attended the event, were praying for our country tonight, again, as many likely are, certainly in light of recent events. Again, a real threat on a national level. So, again, many of the folks there could use your prayers as well. Again, much as our Speaker of the House is doing here. Now, the House Democratic leader, Representative Hakeem Jeffries, said of New York, the violence and chaos in America must end. So, again, some remarks there from the opposing party. And again, understandably, again, certainly not hearing anything from them yet beyond that. But again, some remarks on there. Again, expression of sympathy. Again, sort of a wide acknowledgement that these things cannot happen. Again, it's a real serious thing. In a few moments, we will be joined for more on this by my co-host Jacob Bulmer. He appears to be running a little bit late again. One way or another, we will have him joining us here in a few moments tonight, whether it be by call, whether he calls in or joins us live by satellite. Again, both options, so you will have to stay tuned for that. Now, again, around the time of this event, there were reports of hearing the shots fired. Some in the crowd reported hearing what they believed to be 5 to 8 shots fired. This was in the banquet hall where hundreds of prominent journalists, celebrities, and national leaders were awaiting Trump's remarks, and the premises was evacuated immediately after this. As we know, members of the National Guard took up a position inside the building as people were allowed to leave but not immediately re-enter. Now, security outside was also extremely tight. So again, fortunately for events like this, whenever these things do happen, it's important to have that security in place, understandably. Now, Republican Representative Mike Lawler of New York, one of the guests at the dinner, said that he heard a pop, and we didn't know what the heck it was, and then you heard all sorts of things clatter. Lawler said he gets death threats often, and I don't think we live in a climate where everybody recognizes a problem, but I don't think people fully appreciate how much of a problem it really is. That from Republican Representative Mike Lawler in reference to what we saw just moments ago. Shots fired at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner in Washington, D.C. So, certainly, very apt observation from the congressman. Of course, this isn't the first offense that we've seen on this front, again, specifically referring to our president here. Again, a couple of other attempts on that, and again, beyond that, again, there seems to be a theme of that this day and age. Again, something that we've covered extensively here on the Great World podcast. Again, it's no secret that much of this is motivated by, again, political differences. Now, we believe here at GWP that there's a better way to settle political differences. Certainly seems a fairly unobjectionable statement to make, not terribly controversial, though still worth addressing nonetheless. Again, many of these can be better addressed, better issued. Again, in terms of these issues, they can be better addressed simply by talking things out. Again, oftentimes we see these, certainly in the age of the internet, as we've talked about extensively on the Great World podcast. Again, many things you subscribe to, hopefully Great World Productions being one of them. Many great things there. But again, many of these things, again, you can get wrapped up into these silos and different things. It's important to, again, to kind of be aware of other actual people, again, beyond that. Again, not everyone may agree with you, and when you have these disagreements, there's an important way to address these. And again, that's not by shooting at each other, that's by talking things out. So, again, an important distinction to make on that front. And again, certainly many of the folks at home with questions can call in with those at 417-448-0819 for all those burning questions at 417-448-0819. Great opportunity to be featured on GWP Live. Not sure quite what the holdup is with my co-host Jacob Fulmer. He has said that he has plans to join the live stream here in a few moments. You'll have to stay tuned for that. And no, we're not just saying that so that you'll stay tuned. No, he actually will be joining in a few moments, and again, hopefully we will be able to survive until then. Now, around this time, we know the event, of course, initially appeared to set up to resume after the disorder. Again, there was initially some thought of that. Again, it would now appear that that's what the president would have preferred. They just determined that it wouldn't have been safe to do so. So again, they, of course, did not end up resuming the event, and they've now began to tore down, again, the table settings there. So certainly no question about it at this point. The White House Correspondents Press Dinner has been called off for tonight due to the major security risk. So, again, for those wondering, chances are it will be rescheduled. It will still be done in no small part as per the request of the president himself. He said he'd still like to speak at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. Wants it still to be done, ideally within the next 30 days or so. So, certainly likely in terms of the Secret Service and different things. Again, will be especially careful, again, heading into this. Sort of difficult to imagine, but it would appear, again, the president insistent on returning to speak at this event. Again, though there may be some risks associated with it, something he's no stranger to. Of course, not the first event of this sort. We thank you all for staying tuned to GWP Live. We're covering, of course, just earlier tonight at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner, where the president was set again to address many of these news correspondents at the White House for many prominent media outlets across the country. Things didn't go quite as planned when shots were fired. Fortunately, the premises was evacuated. We now know that the event was called off. The Secret Service, of course, was there, able to evacuate the president, the vice president, the Department of, again, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, again, all of them in attendance at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. Just received word from co-host Jacob Fulmer will be joining soon. Very, very soon. So, again, very glad to hear that. We will hear much more from him, so you will have to stay tuned from that in just a few moments. Now, as we were mentioning just moments ago, that of course is what happened tonight. Was initially scheduled for tonight, had been for some time. Again, this is a major national event where the president speaks annually. This being the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. Certainly did not go quite as planned when shots were fired. Fortunately, though, again, the top government officials there, again, the ones certainly with Secret Service protection, were evacuated promptly. Again, the ones most at risk here, of course, the president, the vice president, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, all of them we now know safely evacuated from the premises. We know, of course, that President Trump was safely escorted from the premises because, again, not long after this, in place of the speech that he was scheduled to give at the White House Correspondents' Press Dinner, that was unable to because of the way things unfolded tonight. Well, once he got back safely to the White House, was able to address the nation. Again, a televised address from the White House, likely quite different from the one he initially planned for tonight, the one for that White House Correspondents' Press Dinner, namely because a great deal of it was spent addressing the threats. And again, much of the sentiment there he addressed, again, chances are, again, as it would sound, he's become somewhat accustomed, sadly, to many of these threats. And again, something of this is expected. Of course, a major position. Again, one of the top world leaders. Again, so certainly not entirely unexpected. Again, that is a major, of course, political office, one of the top ones, perhaps the most powerful person, again, internationally. So, certainly not surprising that there would be threats associated with this, though, again, what is somewhat shocking, we've seen in recent times an elevated risk of things like this. Of course, multiple recent presidential assassination attempts on our current president. So, all of this unfolding in a very short period of time. And again, other figures, again, with similar things beyond that. Again, one of the figures in attendance at this event, we know was in attendance at the event, was Erica Kirk, the widow of Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated just a year ago. Now, again, we see this across the country. Again, there seems to be an issue with this, and there are a number of different causes attributed to this. But again, a congressman moments ago interviewed about this, was kind of asked about this, about the event, and kind of he referred broadly what he referred to as a sort of a climate of violence, politically speaking. And certainly, it's not difficult to see what he's talking about with recent events like this, with the recent assassination of Charlie Kirk. And again, just terribly tragic on that front. And again, must have been very serious. We know that even his widow, Erica Kirk, has received a number of threats and again was here at this event. So, again, that sort of complicates things even further again. So sort of difficult to imagine to put yourself in that position, to being under that degree of threat again with a national level of recognition again. So again, just a number of things worth considering on that front. We know this was, of course, where the event was set to take place. This was actually at the Washington, D.C. Hilton Hotel, again, ballroom there where the event is held. Now, we know that the event, of course, initially appeared to set up to resume after the disorder. We now know, of course, that it's not going to resume tonight. Again, wouldn't be safe to do that. It's been postponed. Again, the intent, as to the latest of our knowledge, as to the best of our knowledge at this point, is to still hold that White House Correspondents' Press Dinner at a later date, again, within the next 30 days or so. Certainly some security considerations will have to take place in preparations leading up to that. But at this point, again, there is still a desire to that. The president himself, again, remarked on this already. He requests that, again, certainly still desires to speak at the event, again, in spite of any threats that might be there. So, certainly very outspoken on that front. Now, we now generally, this Hilton Hotel, where the dinner has taken place for years, again, and was set to take place tonight, remains open to regular guests during the correspondence dinner. And security has typically been focused on the ballroom rather than the hotel at large, with little screening for people not entering the dinner itself. In past years, that's created openings for disruptions in the lobby and other public spaces, including protests in which security moved to remove guests who unfurled banners or staged demonstrations, again, causing a public disturbance at the event. Again, nothing compared to what we saw tonight. Shots actually fired. Again, a considerably elevated threat. Again, compared to this, again, compared to the shots fired tonight, these past instances where we've seen hotel guests sort of disturbing the event, again, unfurling banners or, again, staging and demonstrations, different things. Again, quite the escalation on that front. So, again, understandably, we need to see a mirrored increase in security on that front in order to hold this event. Though we do know, fortunately, again, this is no indictment by any means of the Secret Service, again, any of those. At this point, again, to the best of our knowledge, again, by all available metrics at this point, again, the Secret Service, the National Guard there, again, all of the law enforcement in attendance that was able to help respond to this, they acted swiftly and promptly with the utmost professionalism, and again, were able to get people escorted safely from the event. So, again, what we say here, again, this need for escalated, again, elevated levels of security. This is no indictment by any means. We have no reason to believe at this point, again, things could change, but we have no reason to believe at this point that this was any fault of Secret Service, the National Guard, or anything like that. To the contrary, again, it would appear now that they were able to act swiftly, able to, in the case of the Secret Service, to get the president, the vice president, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, all of them in attendance at the event, were able to get safely evacuated, fortunately. So, again, could have been much, much worse on that front. But certainly, nonetheless, again, even with the existing levels of security, ordinarily, again, threats like this, serious threats on a national level like this, again, whether or not the existing security, existing law enforcement in place was effective or not, again, which would now appear that they were effective, were able to act swiftly and promptly get everyone evacuated to safety. But in any case, again, even again, if everything is going, if they're doing everything exactly as they ought to, well, these major national security threats are still cause for concern. So, again, still likely we will see elevated security in the case that this White House Correspondents Press Dinner is still held. Again, chances are it will be. That certainly is the intent. There are requests for that. That's what the president himself has requests. Again, he still fully intends, it would appear, to speak at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. Yes, Jacob Bulmer now, our co-host, just waiting to join moments ago. And here we should have co-host Jacob Fulmer on. Jake, you're on the air. Can you hear everything all right on your end?
Yes, is everyone able to hear me?
Yes, they should be able to, it would appear. So, any feedback on that would be much appreciated in the live chat. Hopefully, things are coming through loud and clear for the folks at home. Again, any issues with that, we certainly would appreciate the feedback in the live chat. You can also call in with any issues, any questions at 417-448-0819. Again, that number is 417-448-0819. Again, any issues, reception reports, if you want to call in with any questions, all things you can do. So you don't want to miss out on that opportunity. Now, Jake, it's great to finally have you on. As we've been covering throughout the night, moments ago, again, tonight, of course, was scheduled. The White House Correspondents Press Dinner did not go quite as planned when shots were fired at the event. Again, it could have gone much worse, though. Again, we know, to the best of our knowledge, at this point, no one was seriously injured, though the investigation is still very much ongoing. But what happened, again, this White House Correspondents' Press Dinner, where a president was set to speak, shots were fired. Again, as it would appear at this point, Secret Service was able to act swiftly, promptly, and again, very professionally to get these figures escorted from the event to safety. But again, certainly could have been much worse on that front. Jake, yes, you having issues on your end?
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear, my friend.
All right. Okay. Well, then I think we are good on that. So, yes. So, yeah, that was just a couple of hours ago. And okay, we just got some new information in, or I'm not sure if you've covered this here, but we do have a suspect that is now in custody, a 31-year-old man from California.
Those are new details. Yes, we knew that a suspect was taken into custody, though, again, last we covered that, no details were available. We now know that he's a 31-year-old, excuse me, a 31-year-old male, not a 13-year-old male. Again, that would be perhaps much more concerning. Again, difficult to imagine a 13-year-old doing that. Apologies for the slip up on that front, and this is no laughing matter. Certainly, we understand just a bit of a slip up on that front, but we know now that the suspect taken into custody was a 31-year-old, not a 13-year-old male. And that is all we know about him at this point. The investigation is still very much ongoing, so we'll continue to follow that as some of the details come in on that. They may not all come in all that promptly, so you will have to stay tuned again, if not tonight, for GWP News Weekly coming out on Monday night. Again, chances are we'll cover the latest developments on that at the time. Jake, do we know anything else about, again, the suspect taken into custody? Chances are not a lot about that at this point, but anything else that you might add?
Yeah, so CNN recently reported that the suspect was believed to be a guest at the hotel where it was taking place. That was according to the DC police chief. We also know that the 31-year-old from California, his name has been or he has been identified as Cole Thomas Allen. So that is the name of the 31-year-old who fired the shots there at the dinner.
Absolutely. So, another new detail on the suspect taken into custody after shots fired just a few hours ago tonight at the White House Correspondents' Press Dinner. For the folks who are just tuning in, it did not go quite as planned, to say the least. The president, of course, speaks each year at this national event. Again, these White House correspondents for major media outlets, again, come from all over to this event. So again, a major thing to say the least, and shots were fired at this event. And this, of course, in light of, in context of, multiple recent assassination attempts on President Trump himself. So again, as if that as an isolated incident were not enough of a security concern, this is not a first offense. So again, fortunately, as we mentioned just moments ago, the figures with Secret Service protection, again, those sort of being the most at risk figures. So, again, the first to be addressed by Secret Service here, again, are the ones that primarily Secret Service is tasked with protecting, that being, of course, the president, the vice president, the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State, all who were in attendance tonight at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. To the best of our knowledge, at this point, they were able to get out of there safely. President Trump, we know, was clearly confirmed to be out of there uninjured. He addressed the nation just moments ago, again, as a substitute for what would have been his address to the nation for the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. Instead, he had to speak from the White House, again, a televised address from the White House, and in an address quite different, likely, from the one he would have given at the Correspondents' Dinner, as much of it focused on the threats that he had faced just a few moments before that. Jake?
Yeah, so again, a lot of this was already scheduled to take place. There was a few things that, of course, did get moved around. We also know that the event at first was going to continue even after this took place, but then it was decided that it would be rescheduled within the next 30 days. We also got some more information from the DC Police of Chief. This coming in from CNN as well. The chief of police saying that the suspect was armed with a shotgun and handgun and multiple knives as well. So obviously there was quite a few different weapons that this suspect had, and so that, of course, is something else that's really kind of crazy to think about. Is this was not the only thing that we saw, or this was not the only, I guess, weapon, if you want to say that, that the suspect had. He also had a handgun and multiple knives as well as a shotgun. So again, multiple different devices. There was also an exchange of gunfire, as we already mentioned, but something else that I think is quite interesting that the president said is he said that everyone reacted very quickly and that he was protected very quickly, which I found that to be just a little bit strange considering the reaction time that there was. I understand that things happen very quickly, but the response when I watched back the video of the event as it unfolded did not seem very quick to me. What was your take on that, Isaac?
Well, Jake, it kind of did, and it's difficult to tell in perspective. Again, I imagine it would all feel quite quick and quite sudden. Again, for one to actually be there in attendance. Jake, I can't say that I saw exactly that. Again, it would seem, again, by all available standards, that they responded quickly. Again, perhaps naturally a bit of shock. So, again, there may have been an element of that. Again, maybe could have been quicker. Suppose there's always room for improvement. And I'd imagine, again, in any case, again, fortunately, again, whether it could have been quicker or not, again, they were able to evacuate the premises safely. So that's kind of the important thing here. But again, being able, that is a vital thing because, again, if you can respond to these things quickly, again, that's your best chance at getting these people out safe, at, again, responding to this emergency effectively. So, again, understandably, we know President Trump, of course, remarked about this early on, again, after things happened at the event. Originally, there was some question about it. Right after the event happened, there was some question about if the dinner would be resumed later tonight. But again, we now know they determined that it would just be too much of a threat. Again, they didn't have enough information on that, determined it would not be safe to continue that dinner tonight. So we now know, and it was at least requested by President Trump, that the dinner be postponed at least and done within the next 30 days or so. So I'd imagine that again, security levels with Secret Service and whatnot will be elevated in light of what happened tonight. Jake?
Yes, yeah, I would say that there certainly probably will be. And I guess kind of going back on the subject of whether or not the Secret Service acted as quickly as they could have, or would there, all of that concerns, because of course that was one of and this is the main reason I bring it up, is back during the first assassination attempt on Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, that was back on July 13th, 2024. So some might remember that from just a couple of years ago. ago when he was the presumptive nominee in the Republican Party. And he was at a campaign rally there in Butler, Pennsylvania, when he was shot there in the ear by Thomas Crooks. Of course, that was just less than 2 years ago before he was actually elected for a second term. At that point in time, of course, he was in between presidential terms, Joe Biden being the president back in July of 2024. But of course, one of the things that we do know is that there was quite an investigation on the Secret Service as to whether or not they acted quick enough. So that was one of the things. There was a lot of, I guess you could say, backlash as to how they reacted pretty slowly. And I always thought that was a little bit strange because I feel like that they completely surrounded him within mere seconds. But again, if you look back at the video of this earlier tonight, the shots were fired and there was nobody nearby protecting the president for at least 10 seconds before anybody even moved towards his direction. And then even then, they weren't surrounding him like they were in the campaign rally shooting. So that really draws the question of has the Secret Service made improvements since that first assassination attempt back in 2024? Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, that's a great question, Jake. And perhaps it looks like perhaps you've had a chance to look at this a little bit greater detail than what I have. And again, did not initially notice that. And again, sort of significant comparison, as you mentioned, again, between the response of the Secret Service, again, just about a year ago in Butler, Pennsylvania, the attempted assassination of President Trump, of course, then a nominee, of course, in 2024, running for president at the time. So, again, there was, of course, after that event, a call for elevated security. Again, Secret Service, certainly. And we've seen, again, just purely, again, numerically speaking, in terms of what exactly took longer, what had a longer response time, well, we're seeing that the event tonight, the White House Correspondents Dinner, the response time for the Secret Service was longer. Now, again, there are a number of details beyond that which perhaps can explain this. One major one, of course, we know certainly this largely in the fallout of the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania last year. Again, in light of that recent event, we know that those outdoor political events, certainly at this point, is considered an elevated risk. Again, we saw after that with President Trump's inauguration. Again, we've many times, again, I've seen more often than not presidential inaugurations be held outside. Again, we've seen a couple of times, I believe the last time, recall rightly, that we had an indoor presidential inauguration was with President Reagan. Again, interestingly, another president who attempted to, again, there was an attempted assassination on President Reagan. Again, the last president that happened to, and now we're seeing this again. And political figures beyond this, Jake mentioned just moments ago, and again, many others mentioned, not sure if you were aware of this, but one of the people in attendance at this dinner, this White House Correspondents Press Dinner, was actually Erica Kirk, the widow of Charlie Kirk, who we know was tragically assassinated just a year ago now. So, again, sort of difficult to imagine, again, for one, for the ordinary person attending this event. It's understandable how they might be shaking up. Again, they're just at this dinner and suddenly hear these shots ring out. Again, it's reasonable to have concern on that front. But again, coming from her, and again, already receiving recent friends, of course, after having her husband tragically assassinated, again, has received some threats of her own in recent times. So again, that must have been just again, truly, again, the ordinary person, one can see how it might have been shaken up. But again, for her, just sort of very difficult to imagine that, Jake. And we see this pattern again. Moments ago, I was sort of looking at one of the congressmen in attendance at the event, some remarks that he made, again, for one, about this, again, referring specifically to what happened tonight. Again, the shots fired at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. And sort of identifying a pattern with that. Of course, we've seen multiple attempts on President Trump. We saw recently, tragically, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And sort of a pattern of this is he referred to it sort of a climate of violence politically. And again, we've seen this. Again, oftentimes we see this sort of coming from political opposition. So again, we know that there are a number of different positions. And as we mentioned just moments ago, we believe that isn't the best way to settle these political differences. Again, there may be seriously differing views, but again, perhaps isn't the greatest way to address that again by shooting each other, but rather many of these things, these political disputes, can simply be talked out. But again, we seem to see, again, sort of this elevation, again, as the congressman just after the event tonight, and again, as many others have referred to it, sort of this climate of violence, politically speaking. Again, this notion that you can't talk to someone from the political opposition, that it just is unheard of. Now, certainly that is not the case universally, and again, thankfully so. Again, much of what we do, in fact, here on GWP, we have many discussions. Again, many of those relating to and having political implications. And well, we believe many of the folks at home, even who may disagree with us, well, we always appreciate the contribution. We always appreciate the discussion. If there's anything you'd like to discuss, any questions you've got for us, you can always call in at 417-448-0819. If you don't want to call in, you can put those questions in the live chat. But if you'd like to, you can call 417-448-0819. Jake?
Yes, you can certainly do that, and you want to do that before the stream ends here. And so now it is the top of the hour here on GWP Live's breaking news. It is Saturday, April 25th, 2026. It is now 11 p.m., midnight Eastern, where this, of course, took place. What we're following a possible assassination attempt on the president, at the very least, some gunshots that were fired there at the White House dinner that was taking place. And so, again, this is now the White House Correspondents Dinner at the Washington Hilton Hotel. Of course, that's what took place. There was around 5 to 8 shots that were fired inside the lobby. Trump, of course, was immediately evacuated. And then now we also know that the suspect was a 31-year-old from California. And so we're getting some new information on that. Of course, this is now the second, I guess you could say, attack towards the president that the president has faced, even the second one that we've seen in the year of 2026. Some people might recall that just 2 months ago, there was another break-in at the Mar-a-Lago place that took place. And so let's actually kind of recap that. So this is really the first attack on Trump in a while. But back on February 22nd, earlier this year, Austin Tucker Martin, a 21-year-old from Moore County, North Carolina, either Carthage or Cameron, still some unexplained details on that, snuck past security at Mar-a-Lago, a residence of President Trump, of course. And so we do know that he had a shotgun and gasoline. He was shot and killed by a Secret Service agent shortly after entering the property. So that was just 2 months ago. And then now we have this that took place this evening. So, any new developments that we have at this time, Isaac?
Absolutely. Well, nothing too, again, too immediate in terms of recent developments on that, though, again, that just really puts it into perspective again in terms of these different attempts. Again, that being a recent one. Again, at that point there was precedent. This happened, of course, after the attempt you mentioned moments ago happened after the one in Butler, Pennsylvania. Again, which was the big shock. Again, that one where again the bullet actually grazed President Trump's ear. Again, actually noticeably, again, injured, although it could have been much worse if he had turned his head only slightly differently. But again, we saw a more recent attempt. This was, of course, at his Mar-a-Lago resort at the golf course. Again, this fellow who managed to get into there, again, into the bushes, again, at a shotgun and a gas can. So, again, chances are, again, a very serious threat at that point. Again, that's not something that ordinarily one casually does, showing up to the president's resort with a shotgun and a gas can. So, again, could have been a very serious thing. And we're apologizing for our technical difficulties at this point in time. Again, potential lapse in video at this point. Hopefully, though, our audio is still coming through loud and clear. At least you can see my co-host Jacob Ulmer at this point appear to be having a video camera issue at this point. Again, the important thing is that you can hear us here, and again, may even be better off this way. So again, you'll have to hang tight and stay tuned for all this and more on GWP Live. But as we were mentioning just moments ago, certainly not the first attempt we've seen. We saw the one in Butler, Pennsylvania. Again, that being the real shock, where again, the bullet actually grazed President Trump's ear, came very close. Again, he turned his head differently. Could have had his brains blown out on that stage. And again, a more recent attempt. This one at his Mar-a-Lago resort at the golf course. Again, a fellow who somehow managed to get in there in the bushes with a shotgun and a gas can. And luckily, that threat was eliminated. And we now see, just moments ago tonight, what appears to be another assassination attempt on President Trump. Now, something else I'd like to get to on this, Jake. Again, talking about this suspect, the name escapes me now, but of course, a new detail on that you mentioned moments ago. We know he's a 31-year-old. Again, perhaps a correction on that as per our previous coverage. Again, got the numbers flipped around. A 31-year-old man, not a 13-year-old. Again, 31 years old, from California, we know now, and we know the name, which escapes me now. You may have to remind us on that, though, Jake. But you mentioned, again, visiting from California, we know now, but we knew even before that he was a guest at the hotel. Again, we were looking at some precedent for this. Again, sort of recapping on that just moments ago on past White House Correspondents Press Dinners. Again, for many years now, they've been holding it at the same hotel. Again, this ballroom at this Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. And we've seen that in the past where, again, different protesters, different, demonstrations, again, would try to come in with a poster and unfurl it or something, or try to interrupt the event. But in terms of serious security threats, again, this is much more serious than things we've seen in the past at the White House Correspondents' Press Dinner, understandably warranting elevated security. Jake?
Yes, yeah, certainly. And again, that is some of the latest information that we have with this breaking news here at this time. Of course, the event will be rescheduled. So that was some of the more positive news that we got, is that not everything is completely lost with the event, but that is currently what we know with that. So again, still dealing with some technical difficulties here at this point in time, currently having some video issues. Any updates on that, Isaac?
Yes, no updates on that, and again, not abundantly clear if we will be able to get those worked out for tonight. So again, maybe just audio for the time being. And I'm not sure if it's going to be possible to get that video back without again stopping the stream. And again, we don't want to do that. Important thing here is bringing all of you, the folks at home, live up to the minute coverage on these details as they come in. So again, certainly being able to see personally is again secondary to that, to say the least. Again, not top priority on that front, though. If we're able to, certainly will attempt to get that video camera back fully functioning, back in effect and working, though still having some difficulty on that front. Now, not a lot of new details on this point. Again, most recent developments we have heard on this, of course, the suspect taken into custody. We now know a 31-year-old male from the state of California. He was a guest at the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. And we've seen in the past, as I mentioned moments ago, Jake, we've seen in the past where guests at this hotel at the time of the White House Correspondents Dinner have interrupted it in some way. Again, protesters have come in and unfurled a sign. They've had some sort of demonstration, sort of attempting to interrupt the event. But as far as a real security threat on this scale, we haven't seen anything quite yet. So, again, we know, as you mentioned just a few moments ago, that the event will be rescheduled as President Trump requested. This is something that he mentioned very early on, that he would still like to speak at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, even if they have to reschedule it again. Didn't initially want to reschedule it. Initially, again, I thought that there would be some possibility of being able to resume the dinner later that night, but again, they determined that it was just too much of a threat, too much of a risk to continue it at that point. So we now know that it's being postponed. Again, ought to be within the next 30 days or so, and not a clear date set on that. Again, still some wiggle room on that, on when exactly it will be in terms of making all the necessary preparations on that. And one thing I mentioned moments ago, Jake, that escapes me, and perhaps an important detail on this, a major part of the investigations here. The suspect we've been talking about, and you mentioned just a few moments ago, not sure if there's any more information available to you at this point. Again, and I know one thing that you did mention just escapes me at this point. Not sure if you have that handy. That would be the suspect's name. Do we know that at this point, Jake?
Yes, yes. So we do know who the suspect is at this point in time. So that is definitely it was let's see here. I lost the name for just a moment.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Just retrieving that information. We'll have it here momentarily. That we do now know the name of the suspect in this, what would appear to be another assassination attempt on President Trump. This, of course, at tonight's scheduled White House Correspondents' Press Dinner, where shots were fired. One person, as we mentioned, was shot. One of these law enforcement agents in attendance at the event was shot. Fortunately, though, he was wearing a bulletproof vest, and to the best of our knowledge on him, at this point, was able to get out of there uninjured, unharmed. So it could have been much, much more worse on that point. We know, of course, as we mentioned, that some of the top figures in attendance there, who, of course, have Secret Service protections, the president, the vice president, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, were all escorted, evacuated from the premises safely. In the case of the president, again, even soon enough. And again, all in a condition, again, all safe to deliver his televised address as a substitute from the White House, again, which looked quite different, likely, from the one he would have delivered at the Correspondents' Dinner. But again, perhaps a necessary one at that in light of what had just unfolded. Jake?
Yeah, so back on that name, we now know that the person's name is Cole Thomas Allen, as we mentioned. We also know a little bit more information. He is from Torrance, California. So before we just knew it was in the state of California. Now we know that he is from Torrance, California. And we also know that Trump described Cole Thomas Allen as a sick person. So
Yes, again, understandably, again, that's often been the case, not only in the literal sense where we see with many of these suspects in assassinations, again, or assassination attempts, even where they have mental disorders or something. Again, it's not difficult to imagine how a person who would consider attempt doing something like this would be somewhat mentally troubled. Just very unfortunate circumstances on that point. So again, in the literal sense, could be true. And again, beyond that, just sort of expressing alarm at that, or what sort of sick person would be here would attempt to assassinate the president. Just again, on a very basic level. Again, beyond clinical mental disorders. Again, one could say, again, the notion of it, attempting, even considering to do something like that, could easily be characterized as sick. Jake?
Yes, yeah. So understandable that after going through that event, that the president would leave or would use that sort of descriptions, very strong language, but also very direct to the situation. So also just something else that we wanted to update you about. This is just more of, I guess you could say, I guess we'll say more of like a little update here when it
Yes.
comes to the channel with the different live streams and just different things in general that we do here on GWP. Of course, we do various different types of live streams, and so we categorize them into different things. Of course, we've got different live streams depending on, or we've got different playlists for different live streams. So on all the latest GWP breaking news, you can go to our new playlist, GWP Breaking News, for all of these live updates on some of the breaking news. We also have a separate playlist for severe weather coverage as well. So again, these are different things here. And we also have a separate series called GWP Live. So we've got live streams that are completely separate from news and weather. And then we've got breaking news, and then we've got severe weather coverage. So we've got three different types of live streams. And so to separate those, we have them in different playlists that you can tune in for that.
Absolutely, yes. All of these live streams, again, they're not just ones that disappear after the fact, that, again, never to see again, though, again, the best way to tune in for the latest information in the case of severe weather, in the case of breaking news like we've seen tonight, again, any of those things, your best bet to stay informed, up to date on that, is to tune in when we are live. That said, it doesn't just disappear after the fact. In fact, we have playlists dedicated to that here on the Great World Productions YouTube channel. Again, a number of those for different live streams. Again, different types of categorized live streams available for playback after these events. So, again, we'll want to check that out. Again, much of that information remains relevant even after these events have already unfolded. Again, you might find that difficult to believe, say, in the case even of severe weather. Many of the things we cover, though, again, can be applied in the case of weather to future events in terms of the precautions one ought to take, and certainly for historical reference in terms of news, in terms of current events like this. Again, can be useful in that case. And luckily for all of you, the folks at home, those will be available hereafter still on the Great World Productions YouTube channel. Now, if you would like to be notified whenever we do this in the future, whenever we go live, again, to stay up to date on all this breaking news, severe weather for the area, the best way to do that, subscribe to Great World Productions on YouTube. When you do that, hit the bell. Again, ring that bell to receive notifications so that you know whenever we post a video or whenever we go live with this, again, this major information. Jake?
Yes, and if that's a little bit too much, if you think that's going to be an overwhelming number of notifications, obviously we completely understand that. And so something else that you can do is anytime that we talk about different live streams or we schedule them, you'll notice that we have a few live streams that are actually scheduled for later in the week. And so you can actually go and you can click on those individual live streams and you can click the bell for just those single videos. And then you can be updated on on just our live streams. And so, of course, you won't be able to do that until we've scheduled the live stream. But let's say we have a GWP severe weather coverage live stream. We have one that's scheduled for tomorrow on April 26th. Again, that will only be done if necessary. But we have that scheduled on the channel. So right now you can go on that video, you can click on it, and you can hit the bell, and you will only get a notification for that specific live stream. And so again, that's if you want to look at the videos individually. If you are concerned about just getting too many notifications, again, that is completely understandable. So that is why YouTube also offers that. So you can do that here on GWP once we have those scheduled.
Excellent point, Jake. That, of course, as we mentioned, certainly can subscribe for channel level notifications. That does not change, again, our live stream level. When we've got a live stream scheduled, you can go specifically to that live stream if you just want to be notified for that. Now, beyond that, again, when we mention, when you subscribe, when you ring the bell, there are different levels of notifications. It doesn't just have to be all notifications for absolutely everything. Again, there are different degrees of that. So, again, not to fret on that front. A number of great ways to stay tuned for all these great things coming your way from Great World Productions. Now, for the folks who may just be tuning in, as you've likely heard by this point, we had for tonight the White House Correspondents Press Dinner scheduled, a major national event where these reporters from a number of different media outlets all across the country come to address the president, and the president, again, notably addresses all of them, gives a major speech. So, again, a major national event that happens annually. But things didn't go quite as planned tonight, to say the least. Again, this event where our president was set to speak. Shots were fired, they had to evacuate the premises. We now know that, fortunately, the top figures in the administration, again, ones receiving Secret Service protection, the president, vice president, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State were all evacuated safely. The president, even all safe, totally uninjured, in time to give an address, a televised national address from the White House, in place of the speech he would have given at the Correspondents' Press Dinner, though understandably not exactly the same address. We now know that a suspect in connection with this was taken into custody. Again, a name which you may have to correct me on escapes me at this point, Jake, but a 31-year-old male from Torrance, California, who was a guest at the time at this hotel in D.C. where the dinner takes place, the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. This fellow was a guest there and is a suspect taken into custody, a suspect in this recent shooting. Now, only one person that we know of was hit in this shooting. One of the law enforcement agents there, fortunately, was wearing a bulletproof vest, and to the best of our knowledge, at this point, was able to get out of it uninjured. Jake?
Yes, and so I was just getting a look at some of the new photos that were released of the actual event. One of them, of course, showing the Secret Service. There was a picture of him that was shown in the main ballroom just after the shots were fired. This was about 15, 20 seconds afterwards. And the Secret Service agents, there was about 4 or 5 of them that were completely crowding him. They had him covered, again, 360 degrees all the way from head to toe. And then also on top of that, there was also some agents that were armed that were surrounding the table that he was at as well. So there was multiple different, I guess you could say, protection barriers. There was also, let's see, we know that House Speaker Mike Johnson was there. There was a picture of him being escorted out by security as well. Let's see, we have some we have some other pictures of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as he was rushed out by Secret Service agents. So, so they were so let's see, yeah, so the Secret Service agents were standing on guard as all of this took place. There was attendees that were hiding underneath tables and chairs as this took place. There was just immediate reactions. I also just happened to get a video of before the event happened or before the shooting took place. Again, we know that the suspect is Cole Thomas Allen. One of the pictures that was Trump actually posted a photo of the suspect on the ground after he was. After he was captured, we'll say. And so Trump went ahead and he posted a new photo on his Truth social account. And the photo is of the man with restrained behind, with arms behind his back. He is laying face flat on the floor. He is also shirtless in this photo as well. And so that photo of him completely face down to the ground in custody was taken and then was posted by the president. And so let's see, we also have new pictures of coming in from this event. Let's see, additional ones show some of the security personnel around the red carpet. So again, this was a very big event that was taking place. So there was people that ran out of there so quickly that there were some shoes that were left behind as well. Attendees and hotel workers were gathering outside, just trying to make of what was happening. Let's see, we also had a picture there of the Vice President, J.D. Vance, after the event. So just lots of new photos. And again, as I mentioned, there was a newly released video that actually showed the suspect charging at the security officers before he actually before he fired the gun. And so now we even have some video before the actual shots were fired. So that's some of the new information that we have. A lot of this coming in from CNN, as we know that that one of the reporters for CNN was actually just feet away from where the suspect was at. And so, yeah, so CNN's Wolf Blitzer was a few feet away from the gunman as he was shooting. He actually said that on air, and this was something I'm going to quote what he said. All of a sudden, a guy with a weapon, it was a very, very serious weapon. It starts shooting, and I happened to have been a few feet away from him as he was shooting. That was quote from CNN's reporter Wolf Blitzer that was feet away from the suspect as he was shooting there in the room.
Absolutely, yes, Jake. An important point on that. Again, as we mentioned much earlier in tonight's edition of GWP Live, that again, this of course being the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. Again, there are all sorts of folks in the press. Again, it's a major event. So again, White House correspondents from all different media outlets across the country. So again, we saw a great deal of coverage because of this. Again, many of those again. They're already again covering it to begin with. Again, covering notably the president's address at the dinner itself. Again, continued to cover it whenever this event happened. Now, understandably, many of them quite distraught after what happened. Being right there again, close in proximity. Many of them, like you mentioned, again from CNN, Wolf Blitzer, who was there during the shooting. Again, many other of the outlets there who were nearby had their correspondents nearby. And again, something interesting, Jake. I don't know if you caught any of this and some of the coverage. I was checking out some of the coverage myself on that just moments ago, and some speculation on that. And again, this has been known to be done, but again, some of that you may have noticed. Again, signal wasn't great. Again, it was cutting in and out. It's understandable things like this happen in events where there's a lot of commotion. But again, on a federal level, something that we also see sometimes, which also possibly could have interfered with the signal, again, is signal jammers. So again, those are occasionally used on a federal level. Again, could have been used, in this case as a security means. In the case of a suspect that may have been there, that again trying to escape, again receiving communications, again as a security measure. Again, these jammers are sometimes used. So again, that's why again many of the folks at home who may have been wondering there. Oh well, they're in the middle of D.C. They're at this hotel, and yet none of these major news networks have good signal. Well, ordinarily, probably they would, but again, some of them struggling with that. Again, quite likely that signal jammers were in use on the premises at the time as we've seen in the past, Jake.
Yes, and it is possible that could have been part of the communication error when it came to knowing that the suspect was coming in. So that also could have affected that as well, as far as
Absolutely.
communication goes.
Absolutely, yes, it could have. Of course, kind of the intent there, perhaps the idea behind using those signal jammers is to sort of prevent, again, any suspect in this, or any collaboration, any conspiracy that may be going on, and what would appear to be an assassination attempt in this case to sort of prevent that. Again, if you can have any hope of sort of putting a damper on that, if anything by jamming their signals. Again, certainly that's something that you would at least try to do. But again, certainly possible that again these things, when they use these things, that they interfere with a lot of other things. And again, determining again when and where some of those communications again can cause unintentional interferences. I would imagine, Jake.
Can, and so that is possibly what happened in that situation. Well, it is now the bottom of the hour here. It is 11:30 p.m. in Chicago time, as we would say here, Central Daylight Time. It is Saturday, April 25th, and we are still following some of the newest information on a shooting that took place at the White House Correspondents Dinner. And so, of course, we do know that the president, as well as other cabinet officials, are safe. Two are in the hospital, as one was critically injured by a gunshot. And then, of course, the suspect, 31-year-old, is also in the hospital and is being evaluated, although he didn't have any serious injuries after he was captured there by the Secret Service. So that is what we're following at this point in time.
Absolutely, yes, some major developments on that. We now know a couple of people, Jake, as you mentioned, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner were injured, are in the hospital now, so hopefully receiving the necessary treatment on that front. You mentioned also that the suspect in this that we mentioned just moments ago, that 31-year-old male from Torrance, California, who was there as a guest at the hotel, again, where they hold the event, the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. He's now in the hospital, again, receiving treatment, perhaps, or at least being observed. Again, to this point, it would appear that he's received no serious injuries. So, again, investigation on that front still is ongoing. So, again, this is sort of a distinction between what we've seen. Of course, we've covered this kind of in comparison to a couple of previous assassination attempts on President Trump, most recently to the one at his Mar-a-Lago resort, and initially, of course, the one in Butler, Pennsylvania, that being kind of the initial and most shocking one where his ear was grazed and, again, cut considerably by that bullet at the event. Now, one difference here again in those cases, the threat, as it were, was eliminated. Again, weren't able to do a lot of direct questioning with the suspect, but now the suspect is alive, is taken into custody, appears to have no serious injuries. So. This may actually again a sort of a major distinction between this and previous assassination attempts, and this perhaps ever small though it may be a small glint of hope as to actually getting to the bottom of this, actually getting some meaningful information as to the motivations, again, as to if this fella, again, assuming is the culprit in this, if he acted alone or conspired with others in the event. But again, a great deal of possibility as the investigations go on. Again, as we have the opportunity to question the suspect, potentially question others in connection with it, is an opportunity that we haven't exactly had in the past. Jake?
Yes, yeah. So um, that's what we know on that. Looks like I believe we have some new information to
Information.
report here.
Some new information.
Yes, we know that reporters have now visited the suspect's home. Of course, the gunman was identified as a man from Torrance, California. And we also now know that Allen has ties to the LA County city of Torrance, as we mentioned. Let's see, we're still trying to get some more information as reporters are now visiting the suspect's home.
Absolutely. So we'll see if that reveals any additional information about the suspect in question as a potential shooter. Recently tonight, again, not long ago at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner, which, to say the least, did not go as planned. So we have, again, seen a bit of this. This sort of is something new, again, sets this apart in the case, of course, as we mentioned, of the past couple of assassination attempts on President Trump, the threats again were promptly taken out. We didn't exactly have the opportunity to personally question the suspect in the shooting. Again, in those cases, the families, of course, were questioned, the homes were visited, and those. So this isn't entirely unheard of, but again, to varying degrees, there's been some useful insight that we've gained from, again, the families of the suspects in these assassination attempts. So, again, that underway, the home of the suspected shooter being investigated. So, we will continue
Yeah,
to follow
we've got
that.
some new information on that as well. This from the Los Angeles Times. The Los Angeles Times had a reporter that went to an address on 173rd Street in Torrance, outside the home where Allen is believed to have lived. The residence is a two-storied house. It also has a two-car garage and tall hedges. That's what the reporter said. And a man who responded to a knock on the front door said, "Not right now," and declined to comment further. We also know that there was a man named Colin, a 39-year-old neighbor, who declined to give his last name, citing privacy concerns. And his response was, "It's tragic. There's no need for violence in this day and age." The neighbor also said that the residents of the home where they think he lives, the suspect, where they think the suspect lives, he also said the residents of the home had just moved in 6 months ago. So again, the house where the suspect is believed to have lived appears to have only lived there for a few months there. We also had another man who is 50 years old who did not disclose even his first name, said, "We see them every day and we just say hi, and they're very nice. They're peaceful people. They don't make any noise. And when they see you, they say hi. I don't know what's going on inside," he added. So that's some information that we got. Of course, this was reported on by the Los Angeles Times within the last 30 minutes after we were able to identify the gunman at the event.
Absolutely. So, not a lot of new information at this point from the suspects. Again, the uh, people that is present at the suspect's home. Again, many of those refusing to comment to the press. Some very limited information on that. And again, we've seen that before. Again, some of this sounds like, again, oftentimes in the case of these attempts, when these are investigated, again, we'll see the investigators go to the home of the suspect in these cases. They'll also, in certain cases, talk to the neighbors. Perhaps sounds like maybe don't recall exactly on that front, but we heard perhaps someone who, again, perhaps at least lived nearby, who had seen the suspect from time to time, didn't have a great deal of information, recalled smiling at them again, no previous issues, but again, just didn't know what goes on inside. So that sounds like it would seem to be from a neighbor, someone living in the area. And we've sort of seen that in the past, again, with some of these past attempts where we've had interviews, again, with neighbors of the suspects' families. They say really didn't know a whole lot about what was going on, so not terribly surprising on that front. Not a lot of new information gained from that, at least not yet. But again, not that we were expecting a great deal from the neighbors, as again, In these cases, again, oftentimes we see, um, well, as the president suggested, very troubled, perhaps mentally, even with a clinical diagnosis in certain cases, and that again, these people, again, perhaps have these disorders, have their battles, but are somewhat private about it. So many of those around the area, perhaps those in certain cases in their own family, don't necessarily know about exactly what was going on that led up to it. And well, if they did, they're certainly not letting on to it, at least not yet. Jake?
Yes, and something else just to say that we don't actually have verification that these are his neighbors. We just know that these are his alleged neighbors, as we don't know entirely if that actually is his house. But considering the fact that they don't want to say their names, obviously that does say that there is a highly likelihood that this is his home. But again, this is allegedly where he lives, and so that means that these are his alleged neighbors. But that is some information that we have on that. Just wanted to clarify that, of course, if we do end up learning that the suspect lives somewhere else. But again, at this point in time, that is what we have reason to believe on that. So, let's go ahead. And so we have some other breaking news for you this evening. We've also been tracking an ongoing severe weather outbreak that has been taking place. We talked about the possibility of doing a live stream on that. That did not become necessary as all of the storms stayed to the south of our viewing area. Joplin did have a few showers, a few rumbles of thunder earlier this evening, but it was nothing like what we had 2 nights ago on Thursday when a tornado actually teared through downtown Joplin. And so the National Weather Service did a survey on this. They concluded that an EF1 with peak winds of 95 miles per hour damaged an outdoor maintenance storage building at the golf course at West 2nd Street. This is now the second tornado that has moved through downtown Joplin since the EF5 tornado that struck just less than 15 years ago back in 2011. That, of course, one of the um, I guess you could say, most notable weather events that took place there in Joplin. Again, that was back in May of 2011, the EF5 tornado, the deadliest tornado in modern day history. And so, luckily, there weren't any injuries or any fatalities from that tornado that we had on Thursday night there. But that was some information that we had on that week. EF1 Thursday night tornado. There was also a tornado, surprisingly, on the anniversary of the Joplin tornado back in 2019. And then we've also had a few tornadoes that have been reported since then around the Joplin area, as we had one last year that was near the airport, and then there was one around Carthage. So again, and then there was even another tornado in Carl Junction, I believe, last year as well. So we've had multiple other instances of tornadic storms, but this is the most recent one that we've had there in the city of Joplin, an EF1. And then, of course, that was on Thursday night. And then tonight, we also had multiple reported tornadoes. So far this evening, we've had 13 tornado reports, 17 wind reports, but the main reports that we've had have been hail reports. We've had 126 hail reports. We've had upwards of a baseball size hail, a few reports of baseball size hail coming into Arkansas. So that was in Arkansas, western Arkansas is where that took place. And then again, we've had 13 reported tornadoes. One of those includes a landspout in southeastern Nebraska. The other tornadoes were in the states of Texas and Oklahoma, southern Oklahoma and northern Texas and the Red River Valley. That's where the majority of the tornadic storms have taken place this evening. 156 tornado reports in total. Realistically, considering that we did have a moderate risk from the SPC, which is a 4 out of 5 on the storm prediction scale, realistically, 156 reports is really not that bad, all things considering, across that region. But again, still some ongoing severe storms across that region, as we do have a tornado warning northeast of Texarkana at this time. But again, but the great news about all of this is that it has stayed to the south of Missouri, and the severe weather threat is over for tonight in Missouri. But we'll continue to keep you updated on that as we go into Sunday and Monday, as we do have additional severe weather chances, which means that we will have the possibility for additional additional live streams for that reason going into Sunday and Monday, but we'll keep you updated on all the latest on that. That was some breaking news that we had on another front.
Absolutely, yes, Jake. Thank you for that update. And you will have to stay tuned for that again in the event of severe weather, as we mentioned in the past. Again, you can also check that out. We go live periodically in the case of severe weather in the event that it affects primarily our listening area here in the region. You will have to stay tuned for that, as we mentioned throughout the night. A number of great ways if you want to be notified for that. Again, great opportunity. You don't want to miss out on that information. So we, of course, have been covering primarily tonight the shooting that took place at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. And again, things appear to be still going on, and ongoing investigation very much at this point. And you will have to stay tuned kind of as those details trickle in to our other offerings or routine news coverage. Again, coming up soonest, we have GWP News Weekly, which comes out on Monday nights. At the end of the week, we have a more condensed version, kind of that newscast sort of format. And that'll be GWP Weekly Recap coming out at the end of your week at Friday. A great way to start off your weekend. So, again, a couple of things there that you don't want to miss out on. For more information on that, yet again, it would appear possible we've got more information trickling in throughout the night, though again, we've got a lot of the basic information that's come in sort of about the suspect in the shooting. Again, not sure if there's any new information on your end, Jake. And anything else you might add? Any major details? Things appear to be slowing down a bit at this point.
Yes, yeah, it appears that the just kind of the updates that we're getting on that are beginning to slow down. And you mentioned, of course, some of our different offerings that we have that we continue during the off season with the different live streams and the weekly news and weekly recap. Those are really the three main things that we do during the off season. You can also go back and check out GWP Season 5, our season finale premiered just over a week ago. Our third short film premiered about a week ago as well. So those are all things that you can check out. Something else is that we'll go ahead and we'll reveal that the next season of GWP, there might have been some speculation about how long we're going to be in our break before the next season. Season 6 will be premiering in the month of June. And so that is something that you can stay tuned for. But again, in the meantime, we will have weekly updates on news, weather, and sports in our weekly recap, as well as that weekly news, the weekly news being on Monday nights, and then the weekly recap being on Friday nights. Now, there is a quick update that we have for you on this week's upcoming weekly news. On Monday, April 27th, we are scheduled to have our weekly news. There is a possibility that that may be rescheduled or postponed due to the possibility of a live stream going on during that time. But again, if all of that does happen, we will keep you updated here on GWP as far as updates on when the new times for all of that will be.
Absolutely. So you will have to stay tuned for all of that and more. Again, in the event of events like these again occurring in the future, you will have to stay tuned for that. As we mentioned, best way to stay up to date on that. Again, if you have not already, subscribe to Great World Productions on YouTube. Hit that bell and ring it to receive notifications. Again, you'll be able to request again, select a preference on notifications on that. Doesn't have to be just for everything, so not to fret on that front. But again, best way to stay informed on that front. You don't want to miss out on that. And in terms of the most recent developments on the situation that we've been following tonight, that of course referring to the shooting that happened, again, shots fired at the White House Correspondents Press Dinner. It still is very much an ongoing investigation. You will have to stay tuned for the latest details on that. As for tonight, things appear to be slowing down a little bit. So, Jake, if there's anything else you might add, anything else, again, in terms of what's happened, again, most recently, anything perhaps we've missed out on, Any closing remarks you've got for us?
Yeah, so I don't really have any closing remarks on the situation that we've been covering here on our live news. And so, for that reason, I believe that we are going to be soon ending this live stream. So, just want to give people a few more minutes to call in if they would like to. So, again, 417 If you want to tune in live for us, you can give your, if you have any new information that you want to share with us, or you feel like we haven't covered something, you can do that, or you can also share your opinions or remarks on this evening's events there that took place there at the White House. And so we'll give you just about 3 or 4 minutes to do that. And so we'll wrap up kind of on a bit of a lighter note on something that we covered on Friday night, or I guess not Friday night, but Friday afternoon in the weekly recap, which was this AI store. So, kind of back on that discussion. Um, Quite an interesting news story that we covered yesterday, wouldn't you say?
Yes, a very interesting news story. Yes, this AI run store in San Francisco, California, again, is this sort of research project. They call it Andon Market, this project of Anton Labs. And again, it's managed by an AI agent called Luna. Again, sort of operates on sort of under the hood. It's the essentially the Claude 4.6 Sonnet model is what it runs on. Again, interestingly, we've covered a number of recent things with Claude, just one of the many things that we cover on AI here on GWP. Again, you'll have to check out more of that. But again, this AI run store in San Francisco, California, again, sort of started as a project, an experiment of And Labs. They call it And Market. They have this AI agent, Luna, run it. And they started with one simple goal. They said, turn a profit. And, well, Jake, it's my understanding that things haven't exactly gone quite that well for Luna with the And Market, have they?
Yeah, not so much as again we talked about with a $13,000 loss so far. And I guess some new information that we didn't necessarily cover with this story yesterday, but there was a couple of things that Forbes actually covered there on an article regarding this news story. And something that they mentioned was the fact that this is actually the world's first full time employees to have an AI boss, which is quite interesting. We kind of talked a little bit about that earlier on. We also know that the interview calls were only about 5 to 15 minutes in length. And some of the candidates reportedly did not even know that AI was the one interviewing them. They actually thought that a real person was interviewing them for the jobs. That was some interesting details that we got there from Forbes.
Oh, wow, that's sort of amazing. Again, we've talked about that extensively. Again, one of the growing concerns about AI, as it becomes more concerning, that at some point we won't be able to tell the difference again between, in the case of speech, a person actually speaking and AI generated speech or video. Again, we've already seen this with deep fakes, unauthorized deep fakes, again, of Hollywood figures. Again, top figures being imitated with these deep fakes or their voices being replicated with AI. So, a very serious thing. So, if you've been following much of this, this may not be a huge surprise. Again, many of our listeners likely not terribly surprised. Again, very well informed on the AI front. Might not be surprised that AI could sound convincingly human over the phone. So, again, and just one of the significant points on that, and a few of the other highlights on that, we mentioned you'll have to check out our latest edition of GWP Weekly Recap for more on that. But again, one of the major developments on that, one of the things that this AI agent Luna is doing, one of the ways that it's accrued this, again, this $13,000 in loss, of course, started out with a budget of 100,000, so has yet to turn a profit, and it's already lost 13,000. So again, not a great deal of progress yet, and it's responsible. Again, this AI agent Luna responsible for everything from, of course, hiring employees, as we mentioned. Again, placing orders for inventory. Again, things for the store to sell and whatnot. And one of those purchases, one such purchase made by Luna on perhaps questionable purchase was 1,000 toilet seats. Perhaps were initially intended, again, said to be initially intended for the staff restrooms, but again, ordered those 1,000 toilet seat covers and listed them as merchandise. We also knew that the prices are very expensive. Again, one of the items, a bar of soap at this store, going for $10. Again, never seen a $10 bar of soap. And I say that even for San Francisco, California standards, that that is expensive. So again, one of the things about that, again, one of the other things that people noted about this store that Luna seems to really enjoy ordering beyond toilet seat covers was candles, candles, and more candles. Just tons of them, and exorbitantly priced to say the least. Jake.
Yes, and so we actually kind of made a joke about some of or I kind of made a joke there at the end of the news part of that weekly recap, and it turns out that that we actually had a signal break there at the end, so you couldn't actually hear the full joke. So I'll just go ahead and repeat it here on the live stream since it wasn't actually audibly heard on the weekly recap. But my joke was $10 for a bar of soap. Well, I remember when they're at Dairy Queen when there was the $5 meal deal. And so that was kind of the joke that I made at the end of the weekly recap. But a lot of you couldn't actually hear it because it cut out there. We had a bit of a break there in the video when that took place. So
Yes, absolutely. Those were the days. Those were the days. The $5 lunch again. Certainly, certainly missed that again. Things not what they used to be in terms of prices. Again, certainly another story over in San Francisco, and again, beyond that, again with this AI market, again, especially exorbitant prices there. So again, would be interesting to go there for the experience. I can't say if I had the opportunity to go, Jake, but again, I can't say that I would plan on making any purchases there. What about you?
yeah, I would definitely be concerned to make purchases at a store that's been losing $13,000 since it started.
Certainly, certainly. So, again, we conclude on that chipper note with this broadcast. Again, perhaps beginning on not the most positive note, but something a bit of a shock. So, we will have to stay tuned for the latest up to date developments on that and much more. Great World Productions. That about covers the latest information we've got on that. And so, until next time.
I'm Jacob Fulmer.
And I'm Isaac Edges, host of GWP Live. From all of us at GWP Live and Great World Productions, good night and God